Welcome to The Explainer. Okay, let's dive right into this. Have you ever stood in an art museum, looked up at one of those massive timelines of human history, and just felt, well, completely overwhelmed by all the different eras, the movements, and all those endless isms? Yeah, me too. But today, we're going to fix that. We are looking at a brilliantly structured map that takes literally thousands of years of human visual expression and distills it all down into a single, cohesive timeline. We're using this fantastic hand-drawn study guide as our literal blueprint today to decode the whole macro evolution of art. And you know what I absolutely love about this source material? It is a beautifully sketched cheat sheet. It has these great little graphite illustrations of Greek columns, Gothic arches, and artist palettes. It's so human, it's highly organized, and, as you'll see as we go along, it has a few charmingly quirky spellings that just add so much character to the whole thing. So the syllabus organizes this massive timeline into 6 neat Roman numeral sections that we're going to conquer together. Ancient and classical periods, the Middle Ages, the Renaissance, Baroque and Rococo, 18th and 19th century movements, and finally, modern and contemporary art. All right, starting right off with Section 1, Ancient and Classical Periods, the Foundations of Visual Art. Let's move to and see how this builds across our timeline. It all starts with the primal, raw, prehistoric cave paintings, places like Lascaux and Altamira, right? Then, as human society gets more structured, well, so does the art. We move into ancient Egyptian art and symbolism. After that, classical civilization really takes over. We get classical Greek vase painting, you know those famous black figure and red figure styles? And finally, this era caps off with classical Roman wall painting, like the incredibly preserved styles found in Pompeii. So, we're literally going from drawing on wild, rocky cave walls to meticulously decorating the interior walls of Roman villas. Moving on to Section 2, the Middle Ages. Art turns to the heavens. Now, I want you to think of art history as a giant pendulum. During the classical era, that pendulum was swinging hard toward earthly realism. But in the Middle Ages, it takes a massive swing right toward the spiritual realm. Art becomes all about divine illumination. We start seeing Byzantine mosaics and icons designed purely to inspire awe. We get Romanesque manuscripts, which, by the way, our charming hand-drawn source delightfully spells as Monarch, and those focus heavily on meticulous, holy illumination. And then, of course, the soaring Gothic cathedral art and stained glass. The whole goal here wasn't to paint a realistic human. It was to use literal light and monumental architecture to make you feel the absolute presence of the divine. Section 3. The Renaissance, the return of the human. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how it shows another massive reactionary swing in history. The pendulum swings back, and it swings back with incredible force. Where the Middle Ages focused heavily on the divine, symbolic icons, and cathedral architecture, the Renaissance pivots sharply right back to humanism. It zeroes in on earthly realism, human proportion, and, really for the first time, the rise of the individual master painter as a celebrated genius. And honestly, just look at the heavy hitters on this list. In early Florence, we've got masters like Giotto, playfully spelled Giada, on our source cheat sheet, and Masaccio. Then the High Renaissance delivers the legendary trio, Leonardo, Michelangelo, or Michelangelo, as our very earnest note-taker wrote, and Raphael. Meanwhile, up north, the Northern Renaissance masters like Van Eyck, Dürer, and Bosch are exploring this intensely intricate detail and complex symbolism. Finally, we get the incredibly rich colorists of Venetian painting, like Titian, written here as Titian, and Tintoretto. Despite the quirky little spellings in our source document, the massive, undeniable impact of these masters across Europe was an absolute game-changer for visual culture. That brings us to Section 4, Baroque and Rococo, Drama and Elegance. So the crucial point is understanding what happens after the Renaissance achieves essentially absolute technical perfection. Where do you go from there? Well, artists push the boundaries into extreme drama. A vital piece of jargon from our cheat sheet is tenebrism, listed alongside Caravaggio as tenebrium. This is all about highly theatrical lighting. Picture a pitch-black room where a single blinding spotlight hits the subject. It creates these impossibly deep shadows, harsh light, and just incredible psychological tension. This dramatic energy completely splinters across Europe. In the Dutch Golden Age, or the Gelden Age according to our notes, we get the moody, profound shadows of Rembrandt and the quiet, luminous interiors of Vermeer. Then there's the dynamic, fleshy movement of the Flemish Baroque with Rubens and Van Eyck. But then, as the era rolls on, the pendulum swings away from that heavy drama and into French Rococo. Painters like Watteau and Fragonard completely flip the script, giving us these light, airy, pastel-colored paintings filled with absolute elegance, or, as our perfectly imperfect cheat sheet spells it, elegance.
Which leads us to Section 5, 18th and 19th century movements, a century of rapid reactions.
Now, you might want to hold on tight here because the pendulum of art history begins to swing faster and faster. And this brilliantly illustrates how every new movement basically rebels directly against the one that came just before it. We start with the strict, heroic rules of neoclassicism under David and Ingres. Then, Romanticism rebels against those strict rules with pure emotion and turbulent nature, led by Delacroix, Goya, and Turner, noted here as Tournay. Then, Realism steps in and says, no, let's paint everyday, gritty life, championed by Courbet, spelled Corbet, and Millet. Next, Impressionism rebels against that gritty realism by focusing purely on the fleeting effects of light, being of us Monet, Renoir, and Degas. And finally, Post-Impressionism pushes the boundary even further into personal expression and bold forms with Van Gogh, Cézanne, and Gauguin. It is just a breathtaking domino effect of creativity. Finally, we arrive at Section 6, Modern and Contemporary Art, Shattering the Rules. If the previous century was all about reacting to the rules, this era, it's about completely deconstructing the very idea of traditional representation. The visual vocabulary literally explodes here. We get the wild, completely unnatural colors of Fauvism with Matisse. Then Picasso and Braque invent Cubism, fracturing perspective and showing multiple angles all at the exact same time. Next, artists dive deep into the strange, dreamlike world of the unconscious mind with Surrealism, or Surrealism as our notes call it, brought to life brilliantly by Dalí and Magritte. Then, the center of the art world shifts over to America. We see the pure, chaotic, incredibly physical emotion of abstract expressionism with Pollock and de Kooning. But, almost immediately, the pendulum swings right back toward hard edges and commercial irony with pop art. This movement, dominated by Warhol and Lichtenstein, which our source wonderfully documents as Warhol and Lichten's line, takes everyday, mass-produced imagery and just elevates it into high art. And that brings us right to the bleeding edge of our syllabus. The timeline wraps up with postmodernism, an era of mixing past styles with a heavy dose of irony, and moves right into contemporary trends, specifically noting digital art. Think about that incredible journey, from drawing on physical, rugged cave walls, all the way to creating in pure, limitless digital space. We followed this map from the ancients straight through to the digital age. We've watched the pendulum swing from realism to spiritualism, from intense shadows to airy elegance, and from strict rules to total wild abstraction. So I want to leave you with this to think about. Based on this continuous, unbroken chain of historical reactions, what do you think the next era of human visual expression will look like? Where does the pendulum swing next? Thank you so much for exploring this fascinating timeline with me today. Keep learning and keep looking closely at the world around you.